Hello, welcome to Awani Review. My name is Cynthia Ng. Today we'll be talking about a topic that is very critical and pertinent for many executives, but not talked about often, and that is the topic of loneliness, vulnerability, and mental health. Now, today I'm joined by Nick Jonsson. He's a passionate advocate for these issues, and Nick is the co-founder and managing director of Executives Global Network, or 𝐸𝐺N. He founded the Malaysian chapter. 𝐸𝐺N has over 15,000 members globally, and Nick, is also the author of the book Executive Loneliness. Great to have you here, Nick. Thank you so much for coming to the studio to talk with us about these issues.
Thank you for the invitation.
Now, I understand that you have quite a journey before actually co-founding 𝐸𝐺N for Malaysia, and you're also overseeing Indonesia and Singapore as well, correct?
That's right.
All right. So from working in the corporate world for many years to co-founding 𝐸𝐺N, could you talk to us a bit about your journey and also a bit about 𝐸𝐺N? How does it differ from the peer networks that we have heard or seen out there?
Right, so my career then, I started after university working my way up the career ladder, account executive, account manager, account director, general manager, and managing director. And I was very career driven. I wanted to go to the top, and that was all I was looking for. But once I reached the top, I found myself very lonely, very isolated, and I started to question myself then. I started to have self-doubt. I worked so hard for this. Is this what it's like at the top? And with that, then I had some issues and crises internally that I went through. Then after my corporate world and the corporate work, then I was questioning myself, was it only me who went through these feelings of isolation in the workplace? And I found out that there's many more who are going through that. I realized I wasn't alone. And then in 𝐸𝐺N, the peer network, it is a network for executives who basically can get together and discuss with like-minded, a place to vent the challenges they're going through and helping each other, so that you shouldn't feel so lonely in the workplace.
All right, so 𝐸𝐺N is, in some ways, I suppose it's like a group for people to come together and share each other's experiences, right? But I truly resonate, because I think executives or leaders, you're expected to put up with a strong facade or unemotional, especially when you have a team of people that you need to lead. So talk to us about how 𝐸𝐺N helped to break down these issues, and how do you make it a safe space for your members to share their problems?
Yeah, so when I was in my corporate work, I was a leader who was strong, that kind of leader, and I felt pressured many times, but I couldn't really open up in the office. I was worried that people would judge me, and that is the same with many leaders. We feel that perhaps we're supposed to have the answers, but where do we find the answers? We cannot have it all inside us. So in that sense, we all need a safe space where we can be ourselves, where we can discuss the challenges and get some help for it. So what we are providing then with 𝐸𝐺N is the infrastructure for this, starting with that the meetings are confidential. You should feel and know that no one will judge you here. And if you think about the most networks, people come in to show off. They say, this is what I'm good at,
right.
I'm great at this, and we lead it from the other way. You come in and say, I have a challenge with this, help me.
Do you find that it's easy to get people to open up in groups like this?
It's not easy. We need a formula, and we need to really prepare well for this. And it starts already behind the scene, that our team are basically having one-on-one conversations with the members, onboard them before they coming into the peer group meeting, and map out what are your challenges so that they are ready for it. And we have a bit of a debrief for them, so when they come into the meeting, they will stand up and say, this is my number one challenge right now. And then the group naturally can start asking questions and start coming with the feedback and helping them to solve it.
So there is a vetting process of sorts before actually joining 𝐸𝐺N. How does that work?
Yes, it is. Yeah, certainly. So you need to apply. You need to be then also letting everyone know why do you want to join it. Because again, most people will join network perhaps having the intention, I'm going to join this network because I want to push sales of my product.
Right.
I want to come in and market myself. But that's not the purpose of this. This is more for self-development, also to grow yourself. And for leaders, we say it's also about deflating your ego and realizing that you don't have all the answers, and come and lead with this. And when we do that, we connect at a deeper level. And I say we basically connect with the heart, which is a bit of a different way for networking.
All right. You mentioned briefly about confidentiality. I want to talk about that a little, because this plays a big role in making the safe space real for people joining your peer group, right? How do you ensure that members can share deeply without the fear of judgment, of course, consequences? Because these leaders, obviously, they come in and share. They might be worried about sharing information that might give others competitive edge or reveal industry secrets, for instance.
Yeah, so that also starts already before they join a group. So we have multiple groups. So here, for example, in Malaysia, we have 6 groups now, and we make sure that we don't have competitors inside the same groups. You should feel that this is already from the outside a safe group. You don't have someone looking at what you're doing and judging you for that. And then we have a non-disclosure agreement. So everyone have to sign a non-disclosure agreement, and we stress and emphasize in every meeting that this is a safe place. We are not to take the information out of here and gossip about it or spread some news, because everyone should feel that this is the place where you can open up about your challenges and get help for that. And most times when people are just joining, they're a little bit scared and worried about this. So we normally don't put them on the spotlight right away, but come in first and see how the others are doing it, and then you're building up the confidence. Trust is not built in an instant, so it takes some time to develop that, but that's why we set it in the infrastructure and have the agenda and the flow of the events to build this trust.
Okay. Well, your personal experiences as well, you've mentioned that being lonely, and then you found that opening up helps give you clarity. And talk to us a bit about that, because I feel that sometimes that leaders resist embracing vulnerability despite its importance.
Yeah, so I was a very closed person. I'm an introvert myself, and I was not comfortable to open up. In fact, if I'm looking back at my corporate career, I can clearly remember when I started to make some mistakes in my job, but I was too scared to go to my boss to ask for help. I thought that I should have the answers, and it was clearly in Microsoft Excel, for example, I was supposed to know how to do the formulas. I didn't. I started to make mistakes. Instead of asking for help, I started to cover it up. And with that, I got a lot of anxiety and worries. So that is my own experience. And most leaders, if you talk to them, they will have strengths, they will have weaknesses. And the importance is of acknowledging our weaknesses and ask for help for it. But if we are not trained, and if we are not getting the support how to open up and have the infrastructure for it, many of us will be very scared to admit that we don't have the answers. So that is the process that I learned that we need to do, and we need to train this. It can be coaches, it can be mentors, but it can also be in a peer group environment like this.
Yeah, so to that point, so the network or the peer group is a safe space for people to share their problems, but what's next, and how do you help them overcome the problems or challenges?
Yeah, so imagine if you go up in front of the group and you lay out the challenge and an issue you have, and let's mention an example that you have an issue with managing upwards, which is one of the most common topics discussed, is how to manage your head office, how to manage your boss, how to manage the board of advisors and the expectations from the top. So if you're coming up and you're laying out, you explain, this is my organization chart, this is complexity, these are the issues I have, what should I do? Then the group, naturally, they will also have leaders and they will have their experience. So basically, as soon as you opened up, you've been vulnerable, you have decided to share, this is the issue I have, all the experience in the room, and let's say there's 15, 20 leaders there, they bring in all their wisdom and all their feedback, and they've gone through it before. So why reinvent the wheel if others have been there, gone through that, and they are all there to help you and guide you to then test these ideas in a safe environment. And we even see in the meeting, sometimes you can see it like a dry run. If you are to present something to your boss or to your board of advisors, you can actually make this presentation in this safe environment for the group then to give you feedback and question it. And it's better you do this in a safe format rather than at the real show.
Do you have a mentor of sorts to guide the people in the group, or how does that work?
So it's more of a peer-to-peer coaching in the sense that the members are helping each other. But what we provide from EGN side, we provide a facilitator. We call them a chair, so they are like the group leader, but they're also facilitating it, making sure that everyone's voice is heard, for example, because it could be naturally someone who is quite dominant, who take who speak too much otherwise, so we need to invite also the ones who are a bit quiet.
Okay, so I do want to talk about outcomes, right? So you've worked with thousands of people in your career, and I do wonder, like, having the chance to observe leaders who embrace vulnerability in their leadership style and those who do not, or resistant towards change. What differences have you noticed in terms of their leadership style or outcomes in their respective organizations from opening up a bit more?
Yeah, and it's about opening up when you need to. Because if we haven't built all these safe spaces in the good times, when the difficult times come, when life throws you something that is so hard, then if we don't have the habit of opening up, we just close down because we're in a panic and so on. But what I've seen, and let's use the pandemic here as an example, because that's when it was so much change to people. And I can mention two different scenarios. Someone who would be very closed in, perhaps being just laid off and closing down themselves and not talking about it, not reaching out, feeling worried to be judged, that person would suffer. And many times perhaps it was someone who were living and working in Asia as an expat, sent here by head office, suddenly let go, have to take out the children perhaps from international school, move back to the home country. That's one scenario. The other person who'd been training and practicing being vulnerable, who opened up, who knows when something is challenging for me, the thing to do is note it down and then discuss it and to share about my problem. And this particular person I'm thinking about here, he did write this. In the peer group meeting, he shared about the news. I worked for this company for 17 years. I was let go, and this is what's happening now. The group then naturally listened to him, showed empathy, sympathy, and gave him all kind of advice. In fact, in that particular meeting, someone was listening to what expertise he had, and he could link up with someone. And within just a few weeks, he was in a new role. The family could remain in the city, and he's actually still now on track for his career, only for the reason that he was not scared of opening up.
Yeah. Okay. I also talk about how do you then translate that to the team, because this works in team setting as well. Your people that you manage, because when they're afraid to speak to you, to open up, and you create an environment where people are just hesitant, right, to be open with their emotions or their problems, that would stifle growth in the company. So I do wonder, like, do you see that correlation when you work with people by leaders opening up, it creates a more positive environment for the team as well?
Absolutely, because I believe that vulnerability has to start from the top. If you have a leader who's closed, then naturally the team will not open up. And you're not going to go into your boss and share something difficult if they never open up, if they haven't shown that they are human. And that's something that I've seen as well. And I know of leaders who have taken the opportunity to really practice their vulnerability inside that safe space and then bringing that into the company. And I talk about it as a vulnerability muscle. So just like you go to the gym, you're training your muscles, it's about the same with vulnerability. We cannot jump high right away. We have to start a little bit and by practicing, and we can do that in all our interactions on one-on-one, but we can also do it with our teams. And that doesn't mean we have to overshare and share everything, but step by step, just being a little bit more human.
Okay, picking up on that point, vulnerability muscle, right? So, okay, so for people who are listening into this, or leaders and executives think that, okay, this all sounds great, but how do I start? What are the baby steps I could take? Because I'm just not comfortable opening up, but how do I start a little so that it could make a difference?
Right, and the peer group might not be for everyone. So how do you do it on a one-on-one basis, for example? Well, think about in your life, if you have some safe spaces, do you have a close friend, perhaps, who you can be a bit open and vulnerable with? Perhaps you have a mentor, someone who's a bit older, but you can just open up a little bit too. And think about where you can feel safe. It's again not about oversharing, but picking a few different places that you can be open with. And if you don't have someone, then there's coaches, there's psychotherapists, there's counselors, and all these people who are there to listen. The worst we can do is keep it all inside us. If we have some issues and challenges and closing it down and not speaking to anybody about it, that's when it becomes difficult.
So I'm quite intrigued by your background, and you mentioned earlier that you went through some crisis, right? So for you personally, how did you decide, or when did you decide that, okay, maybe it's time for me to reach out and open up? Because I imagine that step must have been very difficult to do.
It was difficult. So I started to have my personal crisis as I turned 40, and I was basically resigning from my job. With that, I ended up in a divorce, and I had about 2-3 years of difficulty. I didn't speak about it to anybody. I was acting on the outside like everything is good. It clearly wasn't. I jumped from job to job, and I was a bit lost. When I found myself in 2018, and I started to really come back to life, that's when I started to think about that there must be much more I can do in this space. And in 2019, there was a friend of mine who went through something very, very difficult as well. and I was not able to help him. And that's when I fell short here, and I don't want to fall short again on this. And that's when I started then to interview executives to find out about the loneliness in the workplace, and surveying them and interviewing them. And with that, I started to write my book. So that was the turning point, and I said that that is basically my purpose in life now, to really talk about the challenges I have, because it shouldn't have to go that far that we resign from a job because we feel isolated there. And because I felt so isolated at work, I also brought that isolation with me at home, and I couldn't connect to myself, therefore I couldn't even connect to my partner, and ended up in a divorce.
Okay. Well, speaking about your book, it's titled Executive Loneliness, where you talk about the isolation that comes with leadership. What's a surprising thing that you have learned in your journey when it comes to leadership and helping other people navigate that feeling? If you can share with us a bit.
Well, I think the biggest surprise for me as I surveyed for the book was how common this loneliness was among executives, because I thought at the time that I was the only one, and that's why I kept it so secret and silent. But as I started to speak about it to executives and interviewing for the book, everyone had gone through those patches. And as I interviewed for it, about 30% of the executives said that they suffer from loneliness in the workplace. So that was the biggest surprise, how common this is. And the solution is to talk about it. So it's not that difficult, but we need to find the safe spaces and a way to deal with it.
Okay, I think finding the safe space, I think that's what's challenging, especially for people whose personality or whose image is built on being strong, being authoritative, right? I do want to talk a bit about mental health. I believe that you have your personal experience dealing with mental health, and it is an issue that still carries a big stigma in organizations, particularly when it comes to leadership. From your perspective, what can organizations do to break down this stigma and create an environment where leaders feel more free to speak about their struggles, be more open about their struggles?
Yeah, we need to normalize these conversations. Just like it's okay to go see a doctor if we have damaged our arm, or we're broken arm, or we're sick, we have the flu. We don't feel any stigma to talk about that we need to go and see a doctor for that. But somehow when it comes to mental health, we have a barrier there. We are shy to admit it. And that is the conversation that needs to change, and it needs to change from the top. Again, here it's the leaders who have to set the scene, leaders of a family, leaders of a community, and leaders of companies that need to show that they are vulnerable and that they are humans too. And they need to start talking about things such as burnout. They need to talk about that depression. They need to talk about all these things. And if they have some difficulties, to show that they're human and share these feelings with the team, and just be there and then be supportive of this and not judging someone.
Do you see that corporate culture changing? The reason I'm asking is I know people who are in leadership positions who want to reach out to get help in terms of managing their mental health. However, like you say, apprehensive of going to the doctor, afraid that it might show up in their health report, things like that. And it just feels like it's still very stifling, that environment, the corporate environment.
Absolutely. The research I did around the book, 84% of the respondents would not talk to their boss or HR about their mental health issues, even if they had them. And 75% of these would not go out and seek professional help. So that means that still people will keep it silent. They will keep it secret for the reason that you mentioned. Maybe someone see me if I go in there. Maybe it end up on my medical record. People are terrified, and I was also very scared of that. That's why also I didn't seek help when I clearly needed it. I saw those as the barriers. But the solution then is, these days, it's easier to book an appointment. We can do a call online. We can do it perhaps during our lunch break. We can book an anonymous meeting. And there's also so many support groups run by volunteers and so on. If we go in the search engine and search, and also at the appendix of my book, I listed a lot of resources. A lot of it is complementary with helplines and hotlines where we can reach out and have a conversation if there's some challenges we have.
And I think the other challenge for leaders as well, if you're struggling from mental health issues, is that you're expected to also, at the same time, function normally and lead effectively. Any tips on that? Like, how do you help people who are struggling to do both at the same time? Struggling personally, but at the same time, you need to show that you can still lead.
Yeah, as leaders, we need to lead by example. And it's about taking care of ourselves, right? It's about back to the basics, physically healthy, mentally healthy, and socially healthy and connected. So as leaders, we are responsible for that. We need to really be those kind of guiding lights to everyone else in our family or workplace to do so. And that is something that I'm passionate about, and I'm working with companies also on this, on engagement plans and so on. And the physical health and mental health need to take the center space in this.
What is the conversation with corporate Malaysia? I know you do quite a bit of work with them. And what is the conversation when you talk about, hey, we need to open up, we need to be more vulnerable and give space for people to speak up?
Yeah, so I just come from having completed 2 days workshop on this space, so I've heard a lot from different companies and so on, what's going on, and in the room were mainly HR directors working on plans and campaigns for the teams. And it's exactly that, starting by having some safe spaces, because they will not come in and talk to the HR director because of the fear of being judged. And they implement schemes such as a third-party phone number. Perhaps there's a counselor or a psychologist who you can call on this number. You can make an appointment here without it sort of being seen by the company. That is quite common these days, that you provide these services. And that's one step. Schools have had that for quite some time, the counselor and so on, but now also it's really coming into the workplaces. And even the concept of peer groups is also something that companies now take internally, and they can do it themselves by organizing a safe space and saying that once a month we will meet together, all the head of departments will meet together, and we will have conversations about the challenges we have and practice then the vulnerability muscle for people to open up.
But I think the challenge is if you're meeting people within your same group of, your network, your colleagues, right? You can't speak as freely as they would like to.
Absolutely. That's why it's best to have it externally and with coaches and mentors and having that infrastructure. And if we look at the world of recovery for people who've had mental health problems or addiction problems and so on, they're always given a sponsor, someone who's been there before, someone who can guide them through, and that is also important. So think about everyone can think, is there someone who has a few more years seniority than me, who's been in a similar role? Ask those people to mentor you and then choose that as a safe space to start opening up and sharing.
Okay. Just a couple of minutes that we have left. I do wonder, in your work, it seems to me it's such a fulfilling work because you're helping others, right? Any personal anecdotes or experiences that you felt like, hey, this is what you said that you've dedicated your life to doing this, and are there any experiences that make you feel like this was it, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life?
Yeah, I can feel that quite frequently, and I felt it already this week as we spent 16 hours together working on engagement plans, and we just ended that training here in Kuala Lumpur yesterday. And at the end of it, when everyone was sharing and having presented the engagement plans that they are going to bring back to their company and present to their bosses, everyone was sharing what was the biggest takeaways and so on. It was a lot of tears there because we said these engagement plans and getting the people to speak up and so on rather than keeping it secret, and it's about touching the hearts of people and leading by example then from the company and creating all these positive engagement plans for the teams to open up more and feeling that, again, it's that we are human beings and we need to lead with heart and really creating that connection in the workplace that I've been missing for too long.
I do wonder this culture of what plays a part here, because Asian culture, you've been in Asia for 20 plus years now, you know the differences between Asian culture or Western culture, corporate culture, right? So can you talk to us a bit about that? Like, what's the difference and how does it impact one's openness to be more vulnerable in a corporate environment?
Yeah, so if I should generalize first, Asian culture is more closed than Western as such. I was born in Sweden, which is a very social, distant country. We are quite close as people, so I feel quite at home in Asia for that matter. That's why perhaps I didn't open up, because I didn't have those conversations when I grew up. And when I'm talking to Asians, then most of them do not feel comfortable opening up, perhaps even to their parents and so on, about the challenge. They rather close down and keep it secret and so on. And what I've seen then in the space where I'm volunteering in mental health recovery and so on, it takes a lot for someone who is an Asian to come there. Many times they're coming perhaps with a husband or the wife coming together, and it's one pulling the other, or two friends, a friend bringing someone in. So I think we need to be quite responsible and look out for our friends here. Think about if there's someone in your family who's going through a difficult time, or in your among your friends, or someone who's a colleague at work, and check in with them and see if we can support them in any way, just to be there to listen. Because if we can get them to the stage when at least they start to open up a little bit, then the solution is already on the way. And how do we reach that? Well, we have to be a bit vulnerable ourselves. So we need to lead by example, also by sharing some things that are going on in our life, showing that we're humans as well.
Okay. And finally, if you could go back to the younger version of Nick Jonsson, just starting out in his work on climbing the corporate ladder, what would you tell him about the importance of vulnerability and mental health? If you could go back in time a little.
Yeah, I would have tried to bring the team with me and not go so lonely journey on the career ladder, really, because I was there and I thought I was there to impress the bosses, hitting the targets, getting the bonuses, and that was my laser focus. I was so result oriented, but I did it at the price of the well-being of my team because I didn't bring them with me. And once I then found myself at the top making mistakes, there was no team who had my back. And I didn't also feel that I could go and ask them for help. So if I could turn back time and redo it, I would come together as a team.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Nick, for being very open in sharing your personal experiences. I think our audience would benefit from your sharing. Thank you so much. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.